Hi everyone, and welcome to mini lecture 2. Today we will discuss passive and active voice. Before we begin, take a moment to gather the following materials for the lecture assignment. You'll need a Word document to write on, and you'll also need access to your current writing project materials. The purpose and goals for today's lecture are as follows. First, we'll define the term active voice. Next, we'll define the term passive voice, and then we'll explore the rhetorical affordances of each. Before we, though, define those two terms, it is important to explore the term voice in writing. Now, voice can take on a number of different meanings. When, though, we are referring to active and passive, voice is going to be equal to a verb. So we could replace active voice with active verb or passive voice with passive verb. So what this comes down to is how we treat the action of the sentence or the action that the actor is supposed to commit in the sentence that helps the reader understand what complete thought we are trying to express. Look at active voice. Now, when we say active voice, that you write in an active voice or you use active verbs, that means that you are using in your writing verbs that communicate a clear and direct action. So an easy way, I think, to understand active voice and active verbs is that they are tethered in some way, shape, or form to the real world. They can oftentimes be associated with a physical action or maybe an expression, an emotion, something of that nature that your reader can see, touch, feel, hear, whatever the case may be. So they are very much tied to real-world experiences and real-world interactions. What also is nice about active voice, and I think why we see it so frequently and why it is prioritized and privileged in academic writing, and I'll even say in professional and technical writing as well, is it because it directly connects an actor with an action. So it directly connects your subject to your verb. And what that does is that creates a clarity in your sentence. Your reader will know with absolute certainty who the actors of the sentence are and what exactly they're doing or what they will be doing or what they did. So what using active voice does is it alleviates and any opportunity for misreadings or misunderstandings. Rather, your audience will have a more clear and direct sense of, okay, in this sentence, who did what and what are the implications of that. So let's take a look at a few examples so we can better dissect this. Upon finishing their study, Wadman and Carter found that enrolling children in online pre-K courses are equally beneficial as face-to-face courses. So we see here, Wadman and Carter, so those are going to be our subjects, found. So we can see the action of found. We can understand in this context what found would look like. We can picture it in our minds. We can put ourselves in the shoes of the subject in a much easier way, at least as the readers, we can do that. Looking at the second example, I purchased the chair from the office store downtown. So this one, just because of the content that's communicated in the sentence, by using the word purchased, we know exactly what the subject of the sentence did, I, but because we said I purchased the chair from the office store downtown, if that's your sentence, chances are strong your audience has probably purchased, a chair from an office store. And so they can invoke their own experiences and their own time, perhaps buying products or even a chair from an office store to help them better understand what it is you're trying to say and help them realize what you are introducing into your writing through including that sentence. The final sentence, the computer battery died as I wrote my paper. So the computer battery is our subject. What did the computer battery do? It died. It no longer functioned. It no longer worked. So again, this is something that because we used an active verb, because we used a verb that would communicate or represent a more specific, clear, tangible action, motion, we can better connect with our readers. So again, similar to the example above, I imagine anyone who has ever used a laptop, a tablet, or a cell phone has had the battery die on them. And so by saying the computer battery died and using an active verb there, we can better give the reader the opportunity to connect with our writing in their own way. So to say, oh my goodness, I've been there. And so when they read the sentence, the computer battery died as I wrote my paper, because they know who the subject is and what the verb is, so who the actor is and what action they perform, they can better make closer connections between their own experiences and your writing, which in really any form of writing is what you're trying to do, is you're trying to say to your audience, okay, here's my writing, now how does it apply to your life and how can you make sense of it, and consider my writing in a way that makes sense to you. So one way that can help us do that is by using active voice. Now let's consider passive voice. Now, when we think of passive voice or passive verbs, these are going to be verbs that indicate a sense of being rather than an explicit action. So remember that with active verbs, those are often tethered to things that we can see, things that we can taste, smell, feel, things that are more, again, connected to everyday lived experiences. But with passive voice, it more or less deals with kind of a metaphysical sense of being. Now, we won't jump, into that rabbit hole quite, very deeply today, but really, it's more of an abstract verb. Again, it doesn't really communicate an explicit action, rather is just saying, okay, well, this is just how things are. Haha, we'll explore that in just a second. But the reason oftentimes that we include passive voice, or that you'll see passive voice, is to remove responsibility of an action. This is typically so because it doesn't require an explicit subject or an identifiable subject. So the milk was spilled. Okay, well, in that sentence, I don't know who spilled the milk. I don't know when. And so I don't know how much milk was spilled. And so you can see that there's really no responsibility. It just so happens that the milk's state of being at that instance is that it's spilled. So the passive verbs are expressed as to be verbs. So is, was, were, be, been, being. And examples of this could read, mistakes were made. The professor is an expert in biomedical engineering. The total cost of the SWIG order will be $13.45. So we can look through these sentences and basically say, okay, well, this doesn't say the professor spoke. It doesn't say the professor taught, or the professor lamented, or the professor ate. It's saying the professor is. And so in that sense, it's basically saying, okay, the professor's state of being is that they are an expert in biomedical engineering. That is their state of being in this context. When it comes to the total cost of SWIG, its state of being is $13.45. And in terms of the mistakes, they just happen to be made. And so again, you can see here how if you, for some reason, need any kind of ambiguity, or you want to approach your sentence in a bit more of an abstract manner, passive voice might provide you some rhetorical affordances that active voice or your active verbs would not. Another way that we can look at passive verbs is kind of like an equal sign. So if we were to say the professor is an expert in biomedical engineering, that's like saying the professor equals an expert in biomedical engineering. The total cost of the SWIG order equals $13.45. Mistakes equal made. So that's another way that we can look at passive voice. But again, we typically tend to see it when the writer doesn't want to place responsibility on a specific subject or does not want to communicate an action or explicit action for one reason or another. So what I'd like you to do for the lecture assignment is I'd like you to review your current project draft materials. I'd like you to find 3 sentences that use passive voice and revise them to use active voice. Then select one revised sentence and compose a brief write-up, so about 50 words, that discusses the rhetorical gains, losses from revising the sentence from passive voice to active voice. So find a sentence that uses the verbs is, was, were, be, been, being, or anything of that nature to, again, kind of create that equal sign or to remove the responsibility from your subject. And then I want you to rethink, okay, well, how can I replace this to be verb with, an explicit action verb, an active verb, and then basically say, hey, this either made my sentence stronger or I think it'll confuse the readers because of the content that follows, or whatever the case may be. You might find that it makes your sentence better. You might find that the change doesn't really make much of a difference, or you might say, this kind of complicates what I want to do with this sentence. So change one sentence from passive to active and tell me your thoughts on it. All right, everyone, that is it for today's mini lecture. If you have any questions or would like to discuss any of these concepts further, please feel free to contact me. All right, everyone, until next time.